Hey guys, Tom here. Yeah, I know that I said in my last video that I was going to look at sort of like the Hitman franchise, and I'm still doing that. I've played them all. The script is all pretty much done with those. It's just a matter of getting them on and editing them. Like the first one's nearly finished, I think. And I'm really happy with those videos. It was just that Atomic Heart came out. Um, I love the game. I thought it was a good opportunity for me to sort of set myself like a time limit on a scale of how much work there needs to be done, getting more familiar with the YouTube sort of content in terms of the editing, the script, and seeing like set myself some tasks. But also, I wanted to sort of release something that was in line with the YouTube algorithm to see if it had any more sort of traction. And yeah, and I thoroughly loved it, so I thought I was going to do it anyway. So no better time really. So again, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. Before we get into it, a few things I just want to point out. The video is following a similar formula as my other videos, so it's a complete breakdown / walkthrough of the entire game, cut into sections of importance. While I go over the complete fundamentals, mechanics, gameplay and story, I'll leave a bit of time towards the end for a conclusion, but I hope to cover absolutely everything Atomic Heart has to offer in this video. I will be giving my opinion throughout the video to keep the video interesting rather than just having a complete walkthrough and a breakdown of the story, and then obviously to finish it off it will be my conclusion. I can't help but feel a bias towards this Atomic Heart review, breakdown even. It reminds me a lot of my favourite games in memory, like Bioshock, Dishonored and Prey. And if you love any of these games, I highly recommend giving it a go. I say it follows a very similar formula to these types of games in terms of the mission-based, skill tree, crafting, and how you sort of interact with the world. So I played the game on hard, and I did not really feel like it was much of a challenge, apart from the first half of the game. So I would encourage anyone to go play it on that difficulty. The game took me around 48 hours to complete to a level that I feel that covered everything, and to the point that I am confident and able to give my thoughts and opinions on everything I feel that needs to be covered. The content that you're watching was captured on the Xbox Series X. I regret to say it, but I did bump into quite a few glitches and bugs, but we'll talk about them as we go on. Overall, I really enjoyed my experience with Atomic Heart, and it's on Game Pass, so I would recommend anyone to give it a go for sure if they've got Game Pass. I would have purchased it anyway. It would just so happen that it was on Game Pass, and I would recommend anyone to buy it anyway, so PlayStation players, or even on PC on Steam. Despite me speaking quite highly of the game actually received quite mixed reviews, with IGN scoring it an 8. Well, or a 7, it doesn't really matter with IGN really, does it? But GameSpot gave it actually a 6. Overall, it got mixed reviews. No one really loved it, but no one really hated it either. I believe it was higher in the bracket on my behalf, but because of the messy story and the repeated testing facilities that use similar puzzles, it drops down a little bit. But again, we'll get it all into that. I'm already excited for the DLC, and if there's ever an Atomic Heart 2, I'll be all over it. And for a complete new IP and the developer Mudfish, who is not very well known in the gaming industry, I think they did an absolute excellent job on this. Okay, so a quick overview. So before we get into the game, there's a few things that you should know that's just highlighted. The game takes place on the grounds of Facility 3826, the Soviet Union's scientific research hub in an alternative history of 1995. And what a fucking setting it is. A scientist called Dmitry Sechenov developed a liquidized programmable module called Polymer, and make note of this because it does a lot of it in the game. This polymer made massive technical breakthrough in the field of energy and robotics. It allowed members of the Soviet Union to free up manual labour and create robots with this polymer in, to create mechanics capable of so much more than just simple tasks. During World War II, just before the Nazis were defeated in 1994, they unleashed a virus called the Brown Plague that left millions dead, and they turned to the Soviet Union to get these robots, really. After the war, Dr. Sechenov created a wireless network of artificial intelligence called Collective 1.0 that linked robots together to create a greater efficiency, like a hive mind, so to speak, so the robots came a lot better at doing manual labour jobs. That's pretty much everything you need to know before going in. The now current day is 1995. Setjob developed a machine called Thought, a neuroconnector. This is a device integrated polymer into the human body, allowing humans to remotely integrate with robots. Thought is currently set to release with Collective 2.0, and Setnov boasts about how it will completely eradicate manual labour once and for all. And Collective 2.0 launched or is launching on the 13th of June 1995, and that is currently where we're at. We take the position of the main protagonist, Major Sergei Sechenov, or Agent P3. I'll be referring to him as Sergei as we go through the video, or either as us or as P3. We are a World War II veteran with some serious memory issues. We don't remember shit from before, but we befriended Dr. Sechenov after he saved our life following an incident that nearly killed us during the war. The game starts off with Dr. Sechenov asking us to come to Facility 3826 to support the launch of Collective 2.0. And that's where the game starts. So quick look at the options before we get any further. We have a massive amount of different settings around the volume, which is nice. All sliders out of 100. It's a great amount here. The gameplay settings is a little less. We got the basics, subtitles, language, brightness, and so on. And lastly, we got the controls, another unsurprisingly amount here. I'm aware that I'm not on a PC, so we haven't got the PC settings, but what I'm really looking for here is accessibility options, so font size, change the color of the font, those types of things, but we haven't really got much here, unfortunately. Right, so we move on. So the game does not mess around here with the visuals. The game looks fucking incredible regarding graphics, but also the location. The game shines in absolutely every area, from the side of the beaches to the underground labs and everything in between. Not only does the setting look incredible, but how you blow plant zombies and robots up alike, it all looks very, very good. When you cut or shoot a robot, it leaves a hole or cut or gash where that shot was, just to add to this sort of realism. While we make our way through the first parts of the game, we are introduced to our trusty companion Charles, who is our left-hand man. See what I did there? But no, Charles is a glove, but an advanced AI glove that talks to us and is where we get our powers/abilities from. He stays with us throughout the game, and you build a relationship with Charles. He answers a lot of unanswered questions as the game takes its course. We move past the crowds, we approach a large building where we're asked to provide ID to enter. Once we get inside, we are introduced to Neuropolymer. These are the skills/abilities in the game, and we get more of these as we go on. This one is the scan ability and works like every other scan ability in the game. Highlights enemies, highlights objects of importance, that type of thing. As we make our way through Sechenov's building, when we get there, we are told that the robots have become hostile towards the Soviet citizens, and they have massacred most of the humans within the Soviet Union. Sechenov explains that Viktor Pezdrov, Collective 2.0 lead engineer, sabotaged Collective 1.0, and he also manages the facility of 3826 and the robots within it.
The vehicle is waiting downstairs. You should hurry. You don't have much time.
Sechenov instructs us to find and capture Petrov with the help of Charles. Sechenov provides us with a key to the car to help us get to where Petrov is located. As we take off, we are attacked by robots and we crash land, and then we wake up from there. No clue how long we've been out, but we've crashed, and during that time, the town has gone to shit. Straight after this, we get hit by a chicken, and I don't know if it's the difficulty level, but we lost about 10% of our health from this. This is the only time chickens are a threat, I promise. Right now, the game is in full swing, quick navigation around the menus. We've got an inventory screen similar to the ones throughout the Deus Ex series. We have our resources on the top right and our ammo on the left. In the center is where we keep all our stuff, and it's split into blocks with big weapons carrying over more blocks. Next, we have our interactive map, similar to the one in Death Stranding. This becomes more interactive in the open map areas, but for now, it's pretty just standard. Finally, we have the lore tab. I'm aware that you clicked on this video wanting spoilers, but I found it interesting that the game gives you nearly full access to all the mechanics and organisms in the game right off the bat. For me, experiencing the game for the first time, this was quite odd, providing the player with so much information about the upcoming enemies. It takes it away from the experience it firsthand. Funny thing is, the game actually says that the reason you can carry so many objectives in your backpack is because the backpack has a technology which shrinks them and then puts them back to normal size when you take them out. What you find in this game, it provides in-game lore for pretty much everything. Why something happens or why something doesn't happen, there's usually some super advanced tech that plays into that. Right, so picking up the axe, we're introduced to the combat system, and the hand-to-hand combat is great. It's brutal. You're not just sort of leaving a blood splatter on the wall, you're chopping off limbs and heads as well. The game does a great job at pacing the combat and gameplay, slowly introducing the player to new mechanics in the early stage of the game. What I found funny is there is so much of the main character punching robots repeatedly in the face, and at this point only God knows how he's doing it and how his hands aren't messed up, but throughout cutscenes or hand-to-hand combat, he just starts punching these machines in the face. On our way to find Petrov, we are introduced to Granny Dina, an old lady who helps us escape a sticky situation while she sacrifices herself. We arrive at this underground bunker where we get our first weapon, the KS-23, or widely known as just the shotgun. Each weapon in the game gives us a breakdown of damage, rate of fire, ergonomics, and relevant stats scored out of 10. In this bunker, we are introduced to break rooms, which are our safe areas for the player that can manually save the game, similar to the typewriters in Resident Evil and things like that.
Saving data.
Cool thing that you recognise quite early on is when you die, you get a death screen like anything else, but there's a little animation on the top of the screen that changes based on how you died or who you died by. Shortly after this, we are introduced to the time dodge mechanic, when enemies are highlighted with an orange/red circle around them. This means that they're going to use a heavy attack, and if you don't dodge it, you will get knocked to the floor and take damage, actually making you invulnerable to attacks and making you vulnerable to the enemy as well. On harder difficulties, very early on in the game, you might as well not get back up. And that brings us to the point of difficulty. I know I've mentioned it briefly before, but the game is very hard at the beginning of the game, but becomes a lot easier the more you run through it, as there's a little offense or defense at the start, but later you just become quite OP. That goes back to one of the negatives, is just there doesn't seem to be much balancing, but again, we'll highlight this as we go along. The main enemy that you'll see throughout the game is called a lab tech machine. These ones are the ones that look like Hitler, or they're called VOV-16 robots. These were originally to help scientists carry out experiments and test research. We are then shown how to lockpick. This follows the same formula as the Fallout games, we are just using a different UI. I make a lot of references to other games as I feel it gives you the best description, but then again I apologise if you've not played the games that I'm referencing. The interaction prompts are really nice and clean. I do love the simplistic style of this, similar to like The Last of Us and Tomb Raider. I just think it's really neat. We're then shown the stealth mechanics. We have the basics here. We don't really need anything too fancy. And Charles then deactivates them by shoving something up their butt. And then you're provided with a quick time event, which is quite neat. During the early stages of the game, the enemies take so much punishment before you get them down, but on our way to Victor, we get taken out by this massive robot creature, and we awaken to a woman referred to only by as Louisa. We then come to our first boss, a super tight robot which shoots laser beams from its eyes. And this is quite a confined space, but we take him out melee style, but lucky for us, I've indulged myself in Callisto Protocol combat system, so it's not too difficult. Like I said, the enemies become a lot easier as you go on, so the enemies that you find now might have a health bar, later they just become standard enemies. Something about the save points, which I failed to mention earlier, is they can be revisited to the save stations again and again. And what I mean by this is if you come to a save area, you go kill a load of enemies, you come back, you save the game, and just utilises the save points quite nicely. Makes it actually quite trivial at some points. I did use this a lot. I just feel that if you can then go back to a save point and use it as many times as possible, why not just incorporate a save system within the menu? I know they're trying to make it immersive, but yeah, just a little bit of feedback. After this, we're introduced to another lock picking mechanic, if you call it that. You just have to click the action buttons when the lights go to the corresponding section, so they all light green. If you click one twice, it goes red and you have to start again. It's important to notice that there are a few lock picking mechanics in this game, but there's no punishment at all for failing any of them. We hear some singing as we make our way through these labs, and we are introduced to a robot called Nora, who is an overly sexual submissive robot that serves as a shop. The currency in the game is neopolymer. I will get it right once, I promise. And our first proper skill is shock. We also have a crafting tab. There is actually quite a lot here to break down, pun intended, but we will go through this as the game goes on. For now, it functions as a typical vendor, and we have some upgrades, buy and craft, and we also have a dismantle as well. Right, so something I want to point out quickly is the cartridges upgrade. So what you'll notice when you go to upgrade a weapon, you'll see a cartridge unlock or a sort of upgrade. This allows your weapon or melee weapon to be bumped out additional status effect damage. The cartridge module, which can be applied to any weapon, allows the application of a thin layer of special chemical polymer to the bullet that passes through the barrel, giving additional properties when it comes in contact with the enemy. We have 3 cartridges to choose from. We have fire, ice and electric. They can be found in the same locations as anything else in the game, so dead bodies, crates, and you can even craft them if you so please. They come in handy if you know a boss is weak to fire, then you apply a fire cartridge. It depletes over the course of a few minutes if you're in a firefight, but they are useful. I personally never actually used them as they take a slot in your inventory, but they do come in handy with your polymetric jet, and then you're laughing. But again, more of that to come. Right, so a quick look at the abilities. They aren't too many to choose from, unlike Bioshock, but you do have quite a bit to upgrade within them. Shock, which I've mentioned before, you can produce an electromagnetic discharge that targets enemies and deals electric damage. Robots are especially vulnerable to electric, and it was my go-to ability throughout the game. Our second upgrade tab, we have the character upgrade, so additional health, carry weight, double dodge, all those types of things. We then got Frostbite. I used a lot of this in the early stages of the game, but later didn't find it that useful. Still good though. With Frostbite, you can hit targets and services with a jet of cryopolymer. Affected enemies are frozen and they cannot move. Organic enemies especially are vulnerable to low temperatures, so this goes really good with the plant-based zombie type creatures. Like Dead Space, we have mass telekinesis, which allows you to grip all the enemies in an affected area, lifting them up in the air for a short period of time. If the affected is interrupted or ends, the targets will fall to the ground. Unfortunately, I never really used this much, as I just liked freezing enemies or electrocuting them. We then got my favourite, the polymetric jet, which sprays the target or surface with a jet of combat polymer. Once applied, combat polymer can be set on fire, electrocuted or frozen, dealing damage of the corresponding type to the affected enemy. This is just straight up OP, spray down an enemy, whip out your electric pistol, there's no concerns here at all. We then have the polymetric shield. You will see me use a lot of this against the bosses that are immune to firepower, and you surround yourself with a neopolymer shield that protects you from melee and ranged damage. It also redirects parts of the neutralized projectiles and sort of puts it back into your energy chamber, really. It does not protect you against critical attacks, and this becomes pretty broken when it's maxed out, and it will probably be patched out, and I'll talk about that in a little while as well. Last but not least, we've got energy management. Does what it says on the tin, upgrades your energy really, which is located on the bottom right, and it's used for energy weapons. You'll probably notice another unlocking mechanism or another lockpicking type of UI as you're watching the gameplay. This again is very simple and straightforward. You have to match the colours corresponding to the lights, which will result in the power turning on. With the upgrades, which I found cool, is that it builds up on the weapon and it doesn't just increase the damage or the stats, it adds additional parts rather than sort of behind the scenes stats that you don't see. You slowly see your gun getting bigger and better and cooler. Due to how I found the difficulty in the early stages of the game, I would spend a lot of time drawing enemies out one by one, dispatching of them, and then using stealth when I could really. So we end up coming to this underground cart system where we dodge some carts and rewire one of them, moving forward into the next area. We find Victor. This introduces a platforming section, which will not be our last, unfortunately. This works the same way as in Dying Light, and you push forward with the analog stick to interact with objects, and you automatically attach to them, and then you move the camera to where you want to jump, and then you jump. It's a little bit slow, but it works well. Just highlighting that if I say Victor or Pedroff, they're the same person. His name is Victor Pedroff. I mentioned it at the start, but I know that I've been back and forth with it, so just to clarify that. So we find Pedrov and track him down in the labs. He's working with his partner in crime, Dr. Liezo Filetorov. Again, sorry for the pronunciation. Pedrov flees, and when we go to try and find him, it appears that he's been killed, as we only find his headless corpse. During this section, we are introduced to a new enemy type. This is the security bot flying robots. We dispatch them in quick succession and get to the next area. So the collectibles in this game, you can interact with dead men and women around the world, interact with their memories, which provides lore and information in the game, and some insight to the location where they died. The other mechanic that we're introduced to is the power balls. This game refers to them as candles. We carry these from one location to the other, which provide power. Nothing special, as I said previously, regarding its formula. The game isn't very original in its gameplay, but it makes up for it in every other area. Next section, we are tasked to find 4 jars of plants to power a generating device. So these are pretty much batteries in the form of plants. We then move to this massive storage area where we jump from platform to a platform, avoiding the broken yet still active robots. So we assume Petrov is dead. Why wouldn't we? We've seen his headless body. And then we're instructed by Sechenov that the Soviet Bureau, or the Politburo Bureau, grows suspicious about what happened is in the facility 3826. As Sechenov has been covering the true scale of the disaster, he doesn't want people to know how fucked it has become. One of the Soviet Bureau members, called Molotov, decides to personally inspect the facility and threatens to shut down Sechenov's Atomic Heart project. So Atomic Heart is the project of the collective. So the collective, which we've spoken about before, are stages within the project of Atomic Heart. So you have Atomic Heart as the overall project, and then you have Operation Collective 1.0 and then Operation Collective 2.0 within that. Charles explains that Sechenov and the Politburo, or the Soviet Bureau, are in a secret power struggle who will ultimately control Collective, and the Bureau will certainly use the incident as an excuse to get rid of Sechenov and take over Operation Collective for themselves, really. Because of this, Sechenov orders us to intercept Molotov, so we go and do that. So we make our way to the labs and track down Molotov. So with that little bit of extra information, we go ahead and go get the plants that we were going to get from the start. So it's actually broken up into 2 sections. So we need 2 candles, so 2 power balls and 4 plants. On our way for the first plant, we're introduced to the mutant enemy. Mutants are a result of a symbiosis between a sprout and a human corpse. When a sprout finds a dead body, it grows a stem through the mouth and nose, penetrating the brain and taking control of the corpse's motor functions in under a minute. The hybrid is fully submissive to the sprout and can either move on 2 legs or have a hovering propeller of leaves above their head.
A mere hypothesis, but I suspect...
To get one of the plant containers for the door, we first need to cool off a boiler underground, as it's too hot to go grab the container. To cool down the generator, what we do is we do a small puzzle type thing. One by one, we follow the ball around the pipes. We drop it into the overheated generators, which cool them down. Once this is done, we make our way back to the hot greenhouse area and grab the power container. And these cooling down generators are used quite often, actually, throughout the game. We go back to the main area and drop the containers back in, and then we go to get the rest. I wanted to point out that I'm maxing out shock ability before we move anything forward. Purely, and at this point I was unsure on what else would be effective. The shock ability was doing wonders for me, so I just sort of pumped it into damage. And I also focus a lot of my points into my axe and my shotgun at this point. I also want to take this moment to highlight the electric gun that we got earlier. You won't see me use it a lot in the early stages of the game, but more so the mid-late game, just because it becomes incredibly overpowerful and it takes energy, not ammo, so you have loads of spare inventory slots. So that's why you might see me flick between all different types of weapons, really. Our next plant container is located in the algae workshop. We need to use our electric ability to power up the water purifier while the conveyor belt moves around, and we take down the drones in the meantime. We go back and we drop off it and we go to get our next container. During the next stage, we are tasked on turning the valves on for all these sort of containers, these glass tubes, I suppose, with animals and plants in them. We do this, but to our surprise, we end up blending all these animals up like smoothies, and we are told this actually helps the plants grow.
Did I just kill all of them?
Bit of lore here with the plant workshop was mainly used to extract plants, make them super vulnerable, and then ship them to Mars, as plants that were around on Earth were just too fragile and too weak, so they would genetically modify plants that they could withstand horrendous weather. It's a bit of a spoiler, but you'll find out later that they actually do this to not only plants but to living animals like bears, giraffes, cows, anything. They will genetically modify it to withstand nature, really. But we'll get onto that. So once we get to this next room, you want a dispatch of all the sort of the sprout spawners before you turn on the power, because if the sprouts, like I said before, if they get onto any dead corpses, they'll infest it and they will turn into mutants. I just kind of wish the animation for this was a bit cooler or like looked nicer. It just looks very janky. I'm aware that the lore provides that it's done super quickly. I just would have preferred a nice animation with it. So after our third canister, we upgrade our weapons and abilities a little bit more. I thought it was smart to just focus on upgrades as we have a limited inventory space. You can upgrade your inventory, like I said, at a cost of neoplomomer. With Reflection, it grants you 2 extra rows of space, which is well worth the exchange, but there isn't any information on how much space you get. So I actually left this until the late game where it just was pointless anyway, unfortunately. So crafting materials, which is used for, well, you guessed it, crafting and upgrading, they can be found on all enemy types, but there is a slight RNG to it. But you can check the drop rate on the upgrade screen, then you move to crafting and you can sort of see what's frequent or what are the rare drops for each enemy. We then move to the next lab and we bump into a scientist stating that we need to acquire a yellow PA400 canister to calm down this super dewdrop mutant thing. It wasn't really explained what it was, but yeah, we have to then move this canister to sort of get our next canister. I know I sound like I'm repeating a lot of things, but they haven't given us a lot of words to work with here. They either refer to things as code names, so like a PA400 or just a canister, but then they will refer to something else later as a canister as well. So I'm pretty restricted in terms of what I can and cannot call these things. So to get this canister, there's a little puzzle where we have to move some huge containers all the way back to where the huge monster was. Despite the game following a fairly simple structure, kill bad guys, do a puzzle and repeat, it never felt stale, as you have the ability to trade all your spent neoplomomer and put into something different, which I think is really good. So you can just trade in all your upgrade something completely different at no extra cost. We make our way back to the big containers, and yet we have another enemy with a health bar, which is a juggernaut mutant. We belittle his health little by little with the electric pistol, and then we finish him off with the shotty. We move outside the facility. We're still in sunlight, which is nice. Nice to get the fresh air once more. We are still in the facility. It's just an outside area. The game struggles to keep you updated between smaller objectives on the grand story, but does focus very much on the overall objective in terms of where you're going and what you need to do. So it'd be like capture this person, but it struggles to keep you updated on necessarily the bits in between, if that makes sense. The game does an excellent job of having environmental storytelling. I love that the game rewards exploration, so I took my time, I sat back, I went around searching in and out of every building in this area. I walked into a room where a box had fallen on a man and it's killed him. You walk outside and there's a pitchfork in another guy's neck, and you create this sort of story in your head of what's happened during this chaos, and I think it's quite nice. So as we explore this village, we can't actually exit without a transmitter. Lucky for us, Granny Xena, the old lady from earlier, makes a reappearance in a flying house. She saves us and picks us up while we watch a video of Sechnav and Molotov having a conversation. They're arguing about the dangers of the robots and how the company is being investigated. It just adds to the information we already know. But we question why Sechenov is being investigated if he had done nothing wrong, but we just don't directly ask Sechenov this. We grab the transmitter off Granny, which allows us to hack into cameras and unlock gates. This becomes a common factor of our arsenal moving forward. We make our way down a road with destroyed cars and houses under a canyon, very reminiscent of the Fallout games. The way out of here is to get on a train. How trains are still running, I have no idea, but we progress. So you might be wondering why some of the robots attack and some of them don't. So the ones that don't, you might have noticed the ones that look like females and the ones with the red tubes around their masks don't attack. This is because these robots were made unautonomous, so they weren't part of Collective 1.0, which I was referring to earlier, so they don't share the same network as them. Due to the programming of the robot, he said that we need a ticket if we want to get on the train, and if we shoot him, he is the only one that knows how to work the train, so we have to get a ticket. While we're off to get this ticket, we have to interact with the dead bodies. They serve as collectibles, but they actually serve as objectives, I think, twice throughout the game. But I just wanted to highlight, it's interesting, the game shows your face an awful lot. So in cutscenes, in the art, even in the menu, in the trailers, but the mirrors don't even show your reflection. I'm aware it's super difficult to program mirrors within games, but I just thought I wanted to point that out. Right, so we get on the train, and because nothing is straightforward, we get knocked off the beaten path by a hedgy robot, or a hedgy machine, which we'll talk about in more detail later. We then get given an introduction to the blueprint locations and what the game calls testing grounds. So these testing ground or testing facilities are located all over the map. Now the map opens up quite a bit, giving the ability to explore this semi-open, beautiful world in search of new upgrades. The way I play these games is I want to get everything the game has to offer. So what we do is we try and get all the testing grounds completed and done before we progress the story. So we go to our first testing ground. These are what they say on the box. They are testing facilities for the robots. To open the doors to these testing sites, you first need to get access to a camera point. This will allow you to take control of the camera, like we did before when we opened the gate. But what we do is we have to use the camera to access the bunkers. Each testing facility is quote-unquote different. We move from platform to platform using our electric powers to get to the end. Each section grants us a different box with a unique blueprint in it. The boxes are coloured bronze, silver and gold, and that's pretty much it. It's a rinse and repeat, complete all the puzzles, does what it says on the tin. Next, before we get to the next boss, we go to another tower and unlock another testing ground door and head there. Again, this is pretty much the same as before regarding the type of puzzle. So we use electricity to change the platforms, jumping one from one to the other. We then come to a section where we have to spin a platform to make it onto the ledge. Right, so back to the boss now. We've upgraded our ability to get a double dash, which is very, very powerful. It means obviously we can get away from enemies a lot better, so 100% recommend that. The enemy shoots at you and you can raise platforms which he runs into, causing damage, and he becomes vulnerable for a short space of time, so I'd highly recommend doing that. After the boss is down, we move to the expedition building, but first we make a quick detour to redirect power so we can get in there first. We move around the building, we grab a robot's arm and use it as a key to get into the main room. So now we are in the main Soviet exhibition center where we believe Molotov is. We are introduced to the home desk robot. She said in order to let us go, we need to complete a Darwin test before she can help us. This is a simple test. We need to find the voice, the symbol, the sprout of the motherland, and we just go off, we go grab them, and we give them back to proceed. Right, so now we're into the next section. We're introduced to another female robot, and in order for us to continue, we need to put her back together so they can both open the door. They can't open the door on their own. They need both the robots.
Floor. Please put her back together again.
So similar to getting the plant containers or the power plants or however you want to refer to it as, we have to get her head, arms, legs and the body parts each one by one. So the game again follows that formula. So first is the legs. Easy, but we are introduced to another enemy type called the Rotorbot, and it gets its names from its automatic self-rotary motor. And what that does, it means that we can't sneak up on that enemy and stealth take it down because its head is constantly rotating around. Next one is the right arm, which is conveniently located next to a mini boss, the apologise. Again, apologise for the name. This walking piece of flesh is a experimental bionic creature consisting of polymatic muscle with an implanted dog brain. These guys are straight up immune to fire and take significantly less firearm damage. The best way to go about these is to upgrade whatever melee weapon you have to max. For me, it was the Zedotchka, I think is how you say it. Sorry, I don't speak Russian. This is the one that you see on the front cover in all the trailers, the bat with the blades on. Then reset all your active skills and pump them all into the shield stat. And the ability you're looking for is the one that gives you additional melee damage when your shield is active. Pop some milk and wine, which are temporary buffs for damage input and output, and you shouldn't even need to take any health potions with you, even on the hardest difficulty. Right then, so we are off to fire up the neutral network because we need to do this to get yet another part for the robot. We have another section within a building on the bottom level, which opens up to an underground area with a pool-like structure. We go to the power station, redirect the power to the second half of the project, and we retrieve the robot's head. So once we get back to the robots, they open up the door and we go meet up with Molotov, who is having an argument with our boss, Sechenov, over the severity of the outbreak. This isn't in person, this is Molotov talking to a hologram of Sechenov.
You're playing a dangerous game here.
Greetings, Comrade Molotov. I don't follow you. What game?
You know what I'm talking about, Comrade Sechenov. Your local malfunction is actually a worldwide catastrophe.
While we wait for our boss to get here in person, we wait with Molotov and his men, but we fall faint and we wake up in this strange dreamlike segment. It's important to highlight that our main character, P3, severely struggles with mental health issues, and he doesn't have any idea why. He just has these blackouts. But I think it's important to highlight that now because it will become relevant later. We wake up in this absolutely bizarre location. It's something out of Alice in Wonderland. Random objects coloured white and red, looking like someone clicked the pause button during this segment. And you hear a woman's faint voice calling us in the background. I also kid you not, we are dressed up as a white bunny collecting apples. Rather than reference it later, this is actually a segment from the war or what happened to P3 during the war. So it's actually a segment, like an imagination segment, but actually a callback to the war. After we follow the apples to wherever the fuck we're going, we finally wake up with no other information. But we wake up and Molotov and all his men are dead. They are fucked. And Sechenov is over us. He's arrived, but he claims that it was the work of the robots. We are given this bizarre yet satisfying scene of two of Sechenov's guards, or those robot guards, cutting one in half and then inserting her hand into her stomach and reaching out for a gold bar. They proceed to break this gold bar, which becomes two separate keys. The keys to the bathtub, which become this blood-formed shape of a man, and that takes Molotov and consumes him. At this point in the game, when P3 asks Sechenov what he's doing, Sechenov replies nothing and not to worry about it. But what it actually is Sechenov is preserving the mind of Molotov for the ever-growing Collective 2.0. Sechenov then detects a transmitted signal to the west, leading him to believe that Petrov, the headless man, is actually alive. He orders us to continue our pursuit for Petrov once more, as he is pretending to be Sechenov, and that is why people are blaming him when in fact it's Petrov. The signal came from a computer station in the center of the district, so that's our next location. Because we were in this open map section, we have access to cars around the map, and the handling is dog shit. They break super quickly, so you won't see me driving around in this playthrough. They are fun, I just didn't find them useful, unfortunately. So before we move towards Petrov, we go a little bit south to a testing ground called Polygon 9, and this is located in a small town, and to get access we have to go through the sewers. We go and complete a small ball puzzle, and then we use the cameras to unlock the statue in the centre of town, open up a secret door. This door is our way into the testing grounds. So now we go to the testing facility. We have yet another Powerball section that we have to move through tubes. And once we get to the following area, we have to take down another Plastics beast. So again, we switched to the melee shield build and made easy work of it. Now that pretty much covers everything in this area. The area is beautiful and you can explore everywhere you want, but in terms of rewards, you're only going to get weapon upgrades from the testing facility, so you're kind of forced in to the structure of testing facilities' main objective, because like I said, there is no side quests. That's everything we can do in this area, so we head to the computer station center. Things start to get a little bit more difficult here. If you manage to set off any alarms, enemies will drop on your location, and they're pretty difficult to get rid of, but they have good scraps, so it's a risk-reward type of thing. To progress in the mission, we have to go inside, but there is a testing ground facility located underneath, and we need to disable 3 generators located in the local area. So we go and do that first. We get to Victor Petrov, who knocks us out and then ties us to a bed. And then we also wake up to Dr. Petrov and Dr. Falatarov, or Falatara, having a conversation about the discussion over a local malfunction. Petrov admits that he did have a part into it, but what degree we still don't know. Unfortunately, they both escaped without providing us more information related to the story.
I just knocked him out. He's unconscious, okay?
On our way to chase them down, we decide to do the testing facility underground. We are also given the information that Dr. Falatarova and Dr. Petrov used to date, but when they found out that Petrov was involved in whatever disaster this is, they broke up, because this plays a factor shortly. We get into an elevator which unlocked before the cutscene, and then this takes us to our 4th testing ground. Again, same pattern as before. We move platforms, we move balls to get to the next area. This one's a little bit different though. We get to fight 2 Bellish machines. These are pretty beefy boys, originally constructed for Wowden and construction, but it's a nice change for the puzzles that we're so familiar with. I would have preferred so much more to have these type of fights or engagements rather than the puzzles. Like, give me another boss, give me a sort of waves of enemies, or just give me something. I have nothing against these puzzles. It's a quite like sort of break from the fast-paced violence, but again, I just think they were overused, unfortunately. I know we literally just completed one straight after our interaction with Petrov, but we stop off at a little farm area where we find yet another testing ground. We take out a few enemies before we get to the top of the house, access the camera, unlock the shed, go to the testing facility. No different from any of the other ones that we've done this time. This is where I wanted just to highlight something. The elevators are fucking long, right? To the testing facilities, I don't know if this was highlighted a lot for me because we were doing testing facilities after another. I'm aware that the game doesn't have any loading screens apart from when you die, and the loading screens are pretty long. Interestingly, Mass Effect was the first game to hide loading screens within the game, and it was actually in form of an elevator, which is funny because it was the same thing here. Right, with that testing facility done, I didn't want to spend too long on it because, like I said, they're all very similar. We travelled to Petrov. Yep, you guessed it, another testing site. This one's super easy. We unlock the farm door by the camera, rinse and repeat. Not difficult at all. Don't really have anything too positive to say on this. Again, just spent a few hours doing the rooms. Again, it's not bad. It's just, again, another testing site. Something I wanted to point out now is how powerful we are. Now we've got weapons, we've got solid level, we have our abilities. Enemies are no longer becoming a threat like they used to. The game does a very good job of pacing it out. Like I said before, quite early on in the videos, enemies that had health bars and we struggled with, now we're just mowing them down. So throughout the game, Charles and every single NPC that we come across questions our boss's motives numerous of times, saying that he's not a saint, but the story heavily plays into him being a bad guy. But yeah, our character P3 fails to acknowledge any of this, despite every single person coming in contact with completely going against every belief we have of Sechenov, and even Charles, who, yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that because I just found that strange. Unfortunately, I sound like a scratch record, but yet again, we have another testing facility. This one is on the waterfront, but you need a key to unlock it. So the way you do about this is get the camera, unlock a platform, go on the platform, grab the key, drop down. That's it. Again, I won't spend too long on this one either. One thing I will highlight with this facility is the fact that we fight a boss at the end called the Baelish, or the Baelish, I mentioned earlier. This one's called M9, holds a very similar set of abilities to the other machines, but is weak to electric. And lucky for us, we've obviously maxed that out, so we made easy work on it. You can use your special vision to highlight enemies and show their weaknesses, just to help you prepare for the fight a little bit better. We're off to the theatres now, the Palistica Theatre to be precise. This is where Pedrov is located. The theatre was founded in 1948 and was the first theatre in the world to use robots as performers. It's the most famous theatre in the Soviet Union, and the theatre was also a place of science where people would study robotics, especially how humans would react to such robotics. Pedrov was well known here, and he worked here a lot, working within the science realm with the robots, and that's how he sort of had a part to play in Collective 1.0. We get to the theatre and walk into a trap. Pedrov, we see him in the distance, but he sets off an explosion. It's also point out here that it's the first time we see mutants and machines fight each other, with the mutants coming victorious. I don't know why, but I love playing games when you defeat all these enemies and then you see them fight each other, like the Flood in Halo 3. Absolute incredible. The building is just lovely. Started to get a bit stale with all the testing grounds one after another, so it's really refreshing to have this confetti everywhere with dancing robots on stands while taking down mutants in this burning building. It's fucking beautiful. Something I failed to mention before, which I think is pretty cool, is when you use Charles to search for things. When he's searching bodies, it will tug on their corpse, like it's actually pulling something out of it, and I just thought that was a pretty neat feature. To add to this dark feel and atmosphere in this location, the robots, or the engineer robots, the ones that I said with the red tubes that don't attack, they're actually cleaning the blood-stained floors. And I just think it just adds to this fucking beautiful atmosphere. Each area of the game feels drastically unique aside from the testing grounds, which I suppose, again, they're testing grounds, they're going to look similar. But again, the game throws these new environments at you, and it's really refreshing. When we're going to Pedrov, we have a conversation with Charles saying that we both believe that Pedrov has done this to the robots as he's lost his mind after the relationship has failed. You see a lot of the ballet dancers in this theatre, and we are told, or through the information that we find within the game, that people will travel all around the world to see them, and they will only be seen by the richest people in the world, which Charles refers to as billionaires at that time. Fun fact, actually, about Pedrov, when we're making our way through the theatre, we learn that he once was or is a robosexual, which is the terms for humans that are attracted to robots. We continue through the theatre, but through the intercoms we hear Petrov losing his mind while he antagonises Earth. He talks about how we are the bad guys, how Sechenov is the bad guys, and he's done nothing wrong. Throughout the game, there's just this absolute outstanding artwork in the form of propaganda, in form of theatre posters. It's clear that the artists behind the game really cared about their end product. To get to the next area, we again have to speak to some corpses, specifically the engineer who knows the code for the door. So we go off and get the code for the door.
0615?
What's that? A code or something?
Are you dumb? It is the date of the new concert. Everybody
We then get to a section where we have to play and watch a robot dance while we fend off against mutants. Classic opera music starts to play, and then the enemies increase, and then the music changes to this opera house club upbeat metal remix, which is absolutely fantastic. I will talk about the music towards the end of the video, but an absolute great set of missions here for sure. At this point, I've pretty much maxed out my playstyle. I'm a lot stronger, my dodge is a lot more powerful, I've maxed out my battery. We're quite beefy at this point, to say the least, so I'm not having much issues anymore. We move to the next section where Petrov has set a puzzle. We need to complete this in order to get to him. We just have to move the ballet dancers in the correct pose to unlock the door. The key to this puzzle is to match the shadows to make it appear that the ballet dancer is killing the men strung up. Pretty cool, pretty straightforward. It's a nice puzzle. We see a lot of this in the Evil Within games, if anyone's ever played those. The constant back and forth between P3 and Charles is amazing. Despite the fun nature of it, they don't hate each other towards the end of the game. They just sort of tolerate each other, which is a bit more of an improvement when they first met, nevertheless.
same conclusion. Especially since your suspicions are more justified than you know.
What do you mean?
Exactly.
We then confront Petrov, and he explains that our boss is actually the bad guy and it's not him. Petrov begins ranting about how Sechenov plans to kill millions of people and enslave the world with the activation of Collective 2.0, which is why he is trying to sabotage the project. He reveals to us that the rogue robots had a combat mode installed to them from the very beginning, which he merely activated. Viktor Petrov then gave us a pair of rings and commits suicide by walking back into one of his robots, cutting off his head. Maybe the headless man at the start was a sort of foreshadowing for Petrov's actual real death to come. It turns out Petrov set a trap before he died. We now have to fight an NA-T256 Natasha. This robot was actually originally created to repair complex repair works and weighs up to 2.5 tons. We make easy work of killing Natasha due to our upgraded Kalasha. That is the game's version of the assault rifle, and we've also upgraded it so it does more damage to robots. You can throw back her weapons, so she has a weapon that throws bombs. You can actually pick those bombs up with your telekinesis and throw it back to her with big damage. Again, I didn't really use this because I went down the route of upgrading my assault rifle to do extra damage against robots, but there's always that option. We sort of lose our minds a little bit at this point. We then have Charles not necessarily helping by sort of questioning our insanity as we struggle to make sense of things, but also struggle to make sense of all this death, really. We're then told by Sechenov that we need to take Petrov's head to him as he wants to distract his memories, similar to what happened with Molotov. We need to bring him to a secret remote part of Facility 3826. The location that we need to go to is called Sakhalin, and on our way to meet Sechenov, we start to put things together. So we start to have a back and forth between ourselves and Charles. This back and forth, we start to run over that Petrov, before he died, said that the combat mode was programmed into the pots during construction. He couldn't have programmed them himself because it was impossible for him to do that because Petrov isn't a fighter, he's a scientist. He doesn't construct rocket launchers. So they have a conversation around the robots didn't magically have rocket launchers in them. Again, this is pretty obvious stuff for me. I wouldn't, if a robot comes at me with grenade and rocket launchers, that's a physical thing. It's not a programming thing. But again, it was pretty obvious to me, but for them, they were talking over it. They sort of like, okay, well, maybe Sechenov isn't this guy he pretends to be. So we're finally getting somewhere with it anyway. On our way back, Charles plays us a tape of Sechenov talking over about his plans of distributing combat robots disguised as civilian robots all around the world, stationing them around nuclear power plants in preparation for a mass Soviet takeover once Collective is launched. We, obviously being new to this information, find this quite sort of daunting or confusing when we start to sort of question our boss's motives. I mentioned about Petrov providing us with 2 rings before he died, and this is believed to control the robots. So again, he didn't give us any information on this. We have no information on this. It's just speculation at this point that the rings that we found have some sort of ability to control the robots. It's important to recognise as well that the old lady, our boss, and our boss's right-hand man have always asked us for these rings, to which we have denied the existence of. We deny the existence because, again, we've been lied to by so many people, we don't know who to trust anymore. We make our way to the Pavlo complex, but not before our final testing facility. And this one's actually quite a nice change, and I think it's a welcoming change at that. We fight another Natasha machine, but this time there's loads of Owl robots. Owl is the flying turrets that we've seen before. Natasha is weak to rockets as well, so we upgrade our rocket launcher to max and make easy work of it because, again, we've got so much rocket ammo because we've been so accustomed to the pistol at this point. The Pavlo Center is the center of the facility, and this is the place where they breed new species and develop new space exploration tech. Once we're down here, we are witness to human experiments, and where I was referring to earlier is where they create polymer animals that are able to withstand more dangers than what Earth has to offer. They are also creating plants, which I mentioned before, and they are just genetically enhanced to live on Mars, which is pretty cool. We then meet up with our boss, Sechenov, and hand over Victor's head. We hand over the head to transfer all his information to the machine again, and the machine can extract his memories and his intelligence for the big collective. But before he could do that, Filetarov, his ex-partner, destroys the machine with a grenade, and they blast us unconscious. We then have another dream segment. This time it's a little less weird, but still weird nevertheless. We have a conversation with Sechenov about how he saved us from the war, and the future's bright, again adding to this sort of oddness where we're hearing voices. These dreamlike segments have no information until the end of the game, so bear with me. A lot of it throughout the game is very little information. There's a lot of what is this, there's a lot of questions, and unfortunately they don't all get asked. But again, if you bear with me, I'll sort of relay all this information towards the end. After we wake up, we are contacted by Filetarova, who asks us to meet her in a lab as she has information that we will find important. Due to us losing our minds and having not a lot of answers at this point, we agreed to go meet her. We then move to meet her. We cross this sort of beachside area and we notice this huge dried up whale on the beach. This introduces our final new enemy type called the Dewdrop, and it's classed as a mutant, but it once was a heavy bionicle creature that maintained transport in the facility, but had congealed with polymorph muscle to produce this monstrous thing. We take it out. It's a bit harder than the other enemies in the game, but we managed to kill it on our first attempt. Right, after this, we believe that the rings that Victor gave us hold the ability to control robots, like we sort of suspected before, through the network. Charles convinces us that the best thing to do is to throw them in the ocean, and we do this without too much hesitation. To highlight it now, the rings are not brought up again. It's sort of this sort of unanswered sort of thing, which is quite frustrating. Again, I'll highlight it later, but for now, we just get rid of the rings. After this, we move towards the meeting point for Dr. Filetarova, but she's nowhere to be seen. As we get there, we are confronted by 8 drone robots which don't attack. We then have a call from Sechenov that gives us the information that Victor's head has now been completely extracted, and they have now got control back of the robots, and that is why they've not attacked us. Sechenov said to come back to him and he will congratulate us on a fine job. Despite this, we still go and find Filatova, but again, she's nowhere to be seen. We do this because despite the robots not attacking and it seems or appears to be all over, we still have a lot of unanswered questions about Sechenov's true motives. Because she's nowhere to be seen, we take a seat and watch TV, and it can only be described as Rapture from Bioshock, where we finally meet up with her under the sea. She asks us to follow her, which we oblige, and we are told this place is called the Tomb of the Mind and holds volunteers who laid the foundation for Collective. She shows us a human test subjects for Collective, revealing that Collective is actually the means to rob people of their free will and control their minds, just like the robots. It's absolutely a fucking sight for sore eyes. It's pretty brutal, actually. Like, it looks really eerie and it's quite harrowing, to say the least, this scene. She goes on to explain that most of the groups of the volunteers end up dying through either suicide or just losing their mind and being killed. But over the years, they have perfected the ability to control people's minds. She explains that Petrov was trying to stop this from happening once he knew what Collective had become. Obviously, he worked for the Atomic Heart, not realizing the true potential of what Collective is or what it would be used for. It's actually quite a disturbing scene, really. At first, we don't actually believe her, which is just fucking stupid. Like, how much evidence does P3 need not to believe what we're hearing is true? It's like in your fucking face, dude. But she shows us it works by getting everyone to do star jumps or coming forward so she can show P3 that it works, really. After we are finally convinced that Sechenov is not as who he seems to be, we agree to follow her to find out the truth about Sechenov and the truth about us. So we dive deep into the labs as Faletiova has said that she can unveil the truth about everything. So bear with me a little bit here while I try and break down everything because it can get quite confusing. I have written the script 100 times to try and get it perfect, but I apologise if I've sort of mistaken something, but I'm going to give it my best go. We find out that Charles actually isn't an AI, but the mind of Charlton Zakharov, Sechenov's friend and fellow polymer researcher who was presumably murdered by Sechenov. Using Zakharov's or Charles's security clearance, we head into the lab's archives to find out more about our past. There we learn that in order to fix our serious brain injury, Sechenov installed a polymer implant in our brain that serves to erase our memories of our deceased ex-wife Ekаterina, as well as control our mind. Obviously, we're absolutely furious at this, and P3 decides to go confront Sechenov about this. So a few things I just want to bring forward a little bit. I believe the reason the main guy, P3 or us, was in denial the entire game around his loyalty to Sechenov was because he was obviously a victim of Sechenov's mind control. Unfortunately, there is no evidence to say of how much mind control was used or what. It just states that he was or had access to P3's mind, and I'm just hoping that that is the reason why he was in denial of Sechenov being this awful person the entire game. I much prefer that option rather than having P3 just fucking oblivious, so we're going to go with that one. So what we also find out in the labs is, the two guards that we see throughout the game, the front cover, the shiny, sexy robots, which we saw earlier with the key. They are actually P3's ex-wife's conscious within the robots. We are told that our wife was also a super high agent of war, and when she died, her body couldn't be saved like ours, but her mind could be. So Sechenov put that in both of the robot guards and wiped her memory again, similar to us. The guards are called left and right, by the way. No other information is given on that. They're just called left and right. How Sechenov does this is similar to what he did to Victor and Molotov. He takes their brain, puts it in to a polymer life form, then he eradicates their memories and takes their intelligence and then puts it into the robotic body, is how he goes about it. Not sure about the ins and outs, but fundamentally that's how it works. And that's exactly what he did with Charles as well. He put him into a polymer life form and then put him in the glove. So again, it's still Charles. In addition to having our memories wiped and replaced with artificial ones, Sechenov replaced most of our body with mechanical parts. And not only did he do this, he actually changed our personality completely. We learned that our name P3 is the name of the subject, so P standing for plutonium and 3 standing for third attempt, meaning actually we are the last and only standing half human, half mechanical agent. And as you can imagine, this is a lot for our player to take on board. He's sort of freaking out a little bit and he's getting quite pent up and angry towards Sechenov. We are told by Charles that the hallucinations are a result of the experiments Sechenov did on us, and with all these questions answered, Charles tells us that we are both victims of Sechenov's experiments and that he needs to be stopped. On our way out the labs, there is an explosion, yet another one, and we have our third and final dreamlike segment. This time it's very less sunshine and rainbows and more living polymer and vents. In this segment we hear a woman's voice that we can only believe is our wives, talking about a bright future. Dr. Sechenov actually comes in and stated that collective is a collection of one mind and is intended to increase the production of science by preserving the human mind of millions of people collective in one massive data structure. He explains how this is the best option to preserve humanity, and he is doing this for the greater good. After this segment, we wake up to Granny Xena standing over us, saved us once again from the explosion. We have a conversation with her about our past and how we had a wife, and Granny Xena tells us that she is in fact our mother-in-law, and she has been keeping an eye on us the entire time and watching our back. She tells us that we need to go kill Sechenov and revenge her daughter and us. We are then given a decision to make. This is the only choice that we've had in the entire game, and it is actively a choice, so we can have two options. We can either refuse to fight Sechenov or fight him, but for this playthrough we shall go ahead and fight him, but I will cover the other ending at the very end of the video.
And come on, Sergei. Vengeance awaits.
Don't rush me. One thing at a time.
We grab our weapons and zip down to where we were at the very start of the game, and we go to the front door. We fight one of his guards, which is a pretty cool fight. She doesn't die, but she escapes through the building. We make our way to the top of the building, moving through this long drawn out hallway, really building up the suspense of the game and allowing the player to take in all this information, or trying to make sense of that information anyway. So we confront Sechenov and he sets his guards on us before we can answer any questions of ours. You only need to take out one of them and they both die due to them sharing the same data system or the same intelligence consciousness, which is obviously your wife. The fight is unfortunately very similar as the other fights. You just sort of strafe and shoot. Despite this, the fight is very visually impressive, and there is something quite saddening knowing that it's your wife within the robot. Right. So, plot twist on plot twist, we then mortally wound Sechenov before Sechenov warns us that Charles has been manipulating us the entire time. Charles admits that he was the one causing us to black out, and he is actually responsible for Molotov and the death of Filatova as well in the explosion.
Molotov. Tell me, Cheriton, did you do the same thing to Dr. Filatova? Did you use my agent to tear her limb from limb?
Once we black out, it's actually him taking control of our body and killing everyone around us. He talks about his true plan was to eliminate Sechenov and take control of the Neo-Polymer project so he can wipe out humanity and replace it with a new race of polymer life forms. Charles shuts down, steals the Neo-Polymer and takes a body form and kills Sechenov while he just walks off in the distance. We then have our final cutscene of us reaching out to our robot wife mid-air during yet another hallucination. During this sort of interaction we have at the very end, we are told that the hallucinations are our mind and conscious stuck in a state of limbo and we are trapped of sorts. This is purely speculation, but I speculate that the last scene of us reaching out to our wife signifies that we are no longer trapped and is us finally leaving limbo and going to the other side. Unfortunately, there's no information on what actually this represents or happens, but what I gather is hallucinations is the fact of the remains of our conscious stuck in between minds as we are being controlled. just some speculations from my end, which I wanted to add. When we were talking earlier about Charles convinces us to throw the rings in the ocean, as they were the only things that could have possibly stopped him from controlling the human race. And with Charles convincing us to throw them away, he then has nothing to worry about in terms of getting in the way of him taking over the world. So I thought that was pretty neat. Again, it's more speculation. There's nothing to confirm this or deny this either, but I'd just like to put that out there. Another nod to how the story was presented is how Charles throughout the game had you question Sechenov from the start and would plant things in P3's head despite P3 thinking that he was a fool all along. So again, how the interactions throughout the game, they're really well done. There's too many to sort of put in here, and they're quite specific, but throughout the game it's quite good how it's executed. So the thing that you're seeing on the screen now, we are never explained what the fuck it is. There's no information online about what it is. The only sort of connection that I can make is it looks eerily similar to what you look like in the dream segments. So again, I'm not too sure. There's obviously something about this, but I don't feel confident in giving you an answer just yet. One thing I'm unsure on is, again, I mentioned it earlier, is how much mind control Sechenov has on P3, as it was stated in the documents in the lab, in the archives, that he has a level of control, but again, this is not explored, which is annoying. Obviously, it's not complete control, but it's still a very grey area. We are definitely left with a few questions, and the game leaves for our imaginations to fill in the blanks. Right, so if you're here to just sort of have my opinion of it, then this is sort of my takeaway. I'd say this is more me just rambling now. But one of the main issues with the game is the lack of the mission or objective tab or information of anything that you have done to that point. You don't have an option to look at your missions that you've done or the certain tasks that you've completed. The only information that you have is the little information located on the top left corner, which is super, super vague. And it changes so often, you have no idea what you're doing. You can be playing the game for hours and the objective is find Victor, but if you've missed part of a cutscene or forget anything or miss something, then you're truly fucked on getting that information back. For a game that relies so much on the lore and story, I truly cannot believe or comprehend this complete oversight in creating the game. Why have no additional information regarding the mission you're doing? You do a mission and then it just says collect this. There's no objective in terms of why you need to get that. You can't have a mission log or anything. It just doesn't exist. So I just think that's a complete oversight that I just wanted to highlight, being one of the biggest negatives for me, really. So this is an issue mainly for the console players, but an issue that I've had is changing your abilities. So your frost or your electric is super, super stiff. And what I mean by this is the game, it's done on a D-pad rather than an ability wheel. So you have a weapons wheel, but to switch your abilities, you have to use a D-pad. So what that does, it means that you have to take your thumb off the analog, which slows the pace of the game right down. Why not just have it on a wheel? Nothing serious, it's just frustrating. And every other game like this is always on a wheel, which makes it super accessible, super quick, especially when they have different cooldowns. You want to be switching from your ice to your electric so fluidly, but it just makes it very difficult. Okay, so I hate to talk about stick to the negatives really, but there are a few bugs and glitches. I played the game for 8 hours before the 70 gig day one patch and 4 days following that. To start off with the little things, the achievements and trophies are completely broken and don't work. Quite a few have not popped, despite me surpassing the requirements. For example, one of the trophies is complete a testing ground. As you're aware, I've completed every single one in the game. Not a concern, I don't really care, it's just again one of the bugs. To give credit, I didn't experience any pop-ins, but I did witness floating bodies, stretched deformed bodies also, and while on the topic of bodies, you can't search enemies while they're in shallow water, as the search button doesn't prompt, which is annoying. So if an enemy falls into shallow water across the beach, then there's no way of looting them. There was a 70 gig day one patch, which speaks for itself, which is just disappointing, unfortunately. I work the equivalent of a 9 till 5, so let's say a game comes out on a Friday, I'll pre-install it, you get home on Friday and there's like an 80 gig patch. It's ruined your evening, really. Not the end of the world, but equally frustrating. I would often get this map bug where after finishing an area where you were not allowed to access the map, so the testing grounds, it would bug out and not allow me to access the map after completing it, even in a different section. So you would go down, obviously you wouldn't be able to use your map in a testing ground because it's not open world, you're in a confined space, but after you would come back to ground, you still wouldn't be able to access it. And the only way that I could fix this was closing the game completely or resetting the console. Halfway through the game, the point where you have to meet Sechenov, where he ties you to a bed, the door wouldn't open, like completely closed. I had to restart the game. And in terms of glitches, yes, it's frustrating. But the game industry has programmed players to just become so accustomed to these. But these are just fucking frustrating, man. Like, again, it wasn't game breaking. I was playing the game on day one, but I think that's for another video. I think we've so programmed now that, hey, it comes out on day one, there's going to be a patch. And I think it's a really bad mindset to have, but you can't help but compare it to other games that come out at a similar time that are absolutely fucked. So yeah, I'm happy to overlook it just because I really enjoyed the game, but I had to restart the console or close the game down numerous of times to get past these bugs. Depending on whether you're watching the video now or whenever, hopefully they're all fixed out and patched, but they were present during the 5 days post-release. So I just want to point that out. Not so much of a negative, but I would have fucking loved some side quests incorporated into the objectives. I feel like it was an absolute missed opportunity. Such a lovely open world game. Would have been nice to build relationships through interactions with NPCs and tasks. As the only NPCs or people that you see are in cutscenes after the first mission. Again, nothing serious, I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. You interact with dead bodies all the time, why not get them to give you side quests? But hey, it is what it is. Not so much a good or bad thing, just something I wanted to sort of put out there, was there is lots of different melee weapons or melee weapons, however you say it, but we don't need all of them. Once you have one max, there's no need to get the other ones. When you get a weapon in this game, like a machine gun, you max that out. You want to max the shotgun out because they're drastically different. Whereas here, there's no need for you to switch between any other weapon, really. Not one weapon does more damage to another enemy like you would with, let's say, weaknesses like fire and electric damage. So maybe in the next game or whenever have less weapons, but the weapons are drastically different. So you have a weapon that does, I don't know, blaze that does more damage to like the mutants, and then you have a blunt weapon that does more damage to robots. Because if you look at like Bioshock and Prey, they had one melee weapon and that worked absolutely perfectly. Another approach that I liked that games that follow a similar formula don't do is having such a fast-paced approach to collecting materials. I know that a lot of people find that boring. I don't. I kind of like it. I don't know why. You'll spend more time collectively in loading screens than you will be for searching for crafting materials, and it's done quick. This doesn't hinder your experience, but yet it still rewards exploration. It's very well done, and it's because of how easy it is to do. You simply hold the search button and it will search and collect all valuables in that area in a quick space of time and just suck it all up. No need to look in drawers or cupboards for absolutely everything. Saying on the positives, the soundtrack is nothing less than fantastic. I know I was a lover of the electric metal opera by the end of the game, and I'm sure you will too. Not only does the soundtrack bang, but the voice acting and to the guns is just all very well done. A lot of the music is a lot of Russian songs from the war, opera tracks, and then just remixed into a hardcore track produced by Jeffrey Day. But that's not all of them. There's lots of remixes. The track isn't produced by one person. I absolutely loved my time with Atomic Heart. I thought it was incredible. Again, it's on Game Pass. I've enjoyed the story despite how messy it was. The combat is so enjoyable to play. I would have liked to see a bit more reward for exploration in terms of rewards rather than just for testing facilities. But the game does leave a lot to be desired around the story and a lot of unanswered questions. I have tried my best to fill in the blanks and put my 2 cents in, but any feedback would be greatly appreciated. I'm hoping that the longer the game is out, the more information from other people will be brought up, and if I've made any mistakes or need any corrections, then I'll most likely add an update video or change this one or something. So thank you. So if you got this far, thanks. No, I really appreciate it. If you have any feedback, negative or positive, as long as it's sort of constructive, I would appreciate that. I've probably slated the names of quite a few of the characters. I hope I haven't missed anything, and if I've had, I've tried to sort of put my own sort of spin on it and sort of give you some sort of headcanon really around it. And again, thank you. My next few videos are going to be Hitman related, so if it's not your cup of tea, I totally get that. And yeah, until the next video. Thank you as always.